I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, this is a large hat, and next to me is the new Lexus GX. This is the first GX that's ever going to come to Australia. It is a luxury off-roader based on the new 250 series Toyota Land Cruiser Prado, which of course we are also getting in Australia. But I think the GX is interesting as it's going to give people a bit of a sort of Land Rover Defender, Range Rover alternative with classic Toyota and Lexus quality. Now, in today's video, we're going to take a detailed drive and test of the 2024 GX. We're going to be going seriously off-road, we'll drive it on-road, and I am going to give you my assessment of all of the variants that are coming to Australia. The one I've got with me here is the Overtrail. It is the rugged off-road focused version. I reckon it looks fantastic. You can let me know what you think down below. Let's strap in for some detailed GX content. Before we get started, hit subscribe. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Jumping into the 2024 GX now, I'm still in the same Overtrail, but this particular Overtrail has been optioned with the Chateau interior, which is this light color on the seats. Now that name might change in Australia. We do tend to get different color names for Lexus than the Americans do over here, but the Overtrail can be had either with a black Nuluxe, which is vinyl interior with these little olive highlights, or instead you can get Chateau, which is basically just a light beige. Now, while it is Nuluxe, it is vinyl, not shying away from that. Toyota and Lexus do a decent vinyl, if there is such a thing. This is very hard wearing. If you actually are going to take the vehicle off-road, this is probably going to be better. And if you've got young kids who maybe make a bit of a mess in the car from time to time, this thing just wipes down beautifully. Plus, the front seats are heated and cooled, so you don't have the usual sticky issues that you have sitting on a non-leather surface. Speaking of the seats, they're big, they're broad, they're not too tightly bolstered, so if you have a bigger frame than I do, you're probably going to find these seats to be quite comfortable. For my part, I really would have liked a little bit more side support in the corners, but the overall comfort levels are decent enough. Now, the interior is actually quite un-Lexus-like in many ways, isn't it? The squared-off dashboard feels maybe a little bit Mercedes G-Wagon, a little bit Land Rover Defender, but I like what Lexus has done with this car. It actually looks cool. I can't actually remember too many cool Lexuses. Obviously, the LC is pretty amazing. The LFA was pretty cool. This one is up there, though, in terms of the cred that I'm getting from this car. The dash has absolutely no wood on it. There's kind of this simulated finish down here, but this is not like your grandpa's Lexus. It's quite understated. Maybe even a touch too understated for my taste, but you can let me know what you think in the comments. Leather steering wheel here with paddle shifters for the automatic transmission. Proper shifter as well. None of this silly little electronic shifter. It actually is a proper one which feels hefty and like a quality item. There is tech though, of course. 14-inch touchscreen over here. Permanent climate controls, even though most of them are touch-based. You've got your navigation, which is cloud-based, plus wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, and another digital screen in front of you as a driver, which is extensively customizable. Very good to see. But we do come to a bit of a spec problem that we think is going to happen to the Australian car. 3 grades: luxury, this Overtrail, and then sports luxury on really big 22-inch wheels at the top. But it's sounding like premium Mark Levinson audio and the sunroof and a couple of other luxury features are going to be restricted to the top-end car. I would want my Overtrail with premium audio. Here in America, they have a trim which I'm sitting in called the Overtrail Plus, which is Overtrail, but it has all those luxury features. Australia really should be doing that. I'm seriously hoping Lexus changes course and offers an enhancement pack to the lower models of the GX so you can still get some of those high-end features without having to buy the sports luxury. In terms of price, guidance is actually starting from around $110,000 before on-road costs, probably heading up closer to that 200 level on-road for a fully spec'd out GX, but maybe entry price a little bit lower than we were expecting. Storage is good. Big cup holders here, wireless charging, which is going to hold your phone on it. It's rubberized. You got a cool box in the center, at least on this American spec car. Lovely little shelf over here, and decent sized door bins too. And quality is exceptional. Exactly what we'd expect from a Lexus. Everything feels extremely well screwed together. You know, it's not overtly plush, but it's incredibly well built. I think it strikes the right balance. Now, Jumping into the back seat of the GX, the rear door does not actually open that wide, so not going to be as easy to fit child seats in the back of this than some rivals, but you know, it's okay. But what you do get is that super solid Land Cruiser-esque thunk when you close that door. In terms of space back here, honestly, it is a mixed bag. Now, unlike vehicles like a Volkswagen Touareg or an Audi Q7, the Lexus GX is a proper body-on-frame four-wheel drive. That means that the body is sitting on top of a separate frame, which pushes up the floor of the vehicle. You're always going to get a bunch of compromises because of that. And you can probably see one of them. My legs are floating because the floor is quite high. So to get really comfortable, I'm going to have to splay my legs. It's a bit like an EV in that sense. Headroom for a 6-footer like me, 183 centimeters, is actually quite decent. The sunroof is not panoramic, so it does have a bit of a hump, but it sort of drops off for where my head goes. Legroom is good. Toe room is pretty terrible. However, this seat is as low as it will go. That's my driving position. So sitting behind myself, not that that's possible in reality, is a little bit uncomfortable. You could get someone in the center, however, but you've got your air vents down here, heated rear seats, USB-C ports throughout the car. Over here on the windowsill, you do in fact have your inbuilt sunblinds, which take up most of the window. All those well-made, relatively plush materials continue back here. And you've got your flip down armrest with 2 cup holders as well. So while space and comfort is not as good as car-based rivals, overall, it isn't too bad. However, big caveat, the Overtrail is not available with a third row. So in order to show you the space in the third row, I'm gonna have to change to another GX right here. You've got to bear with me for a second because in the previous scene, we were in an Overtrail, which is 5 seats only, unfortunately. So if you want 7 seats, you're gonna have to go for the base model luxury, which is what I'm sitting in here, or the top of the range sports luxury. If you do that, what you're actually getting is not a terrible third row. So the seats in the second row, they actually tumble out of the way easily. So nice and easy for kids to get back here. For myself, you know, I actually do fit. I actually have headroom. I've got a little bit of leg room. Not the most comfortable place in the world, but for short drives, this is absolutely fine. One issue is that the center row just does not slide. That was to save weight in this car. We got told by the chief engineer. It does mean your legroom's a bit restricted, but as I say, for me, this actually works perfectly. One bit of faff, not all GXs are equipped with a power third row, and doing it manually, like in this base model, is a faff. You've got to pull up the backrest from the boot, and then you've got to do the base separately from here in the back. So setting it up and packing it down, definitely not as easy as in some other SUVs. Moving around the back of the GX, I'm a fan of the proportions. Do you like the way this SUV looks? You can let me know down below in the comments. As for color, the flat gray isn't for me. I think there is a very cool dark green that I'd probably go for. There's also a really nice earthy color. Consider that as well. GX550, this is the pure petrol. We also get separate opening glass on the GX. Nice feature. You can put stuff in, you can take stuff out without your things tumbling out if you're parked on an uphill stretch. But of course, we also have a full power opening door as standard. The old GX rear door opened outwards. Now it opens up. Some people prefer one or the other. Loads of space, but no third row in the Overtrail. I think that could be a misstep. I think a lot of people will want the rugged styling with the flexibility of 3 rows. Maybe we'll see that corrected in future, but you have to get a different trim if you want that third row seat. Under the boot floor, you've got your toolkit and a full-size spare is standard on the GX. It's underslung like many other Toyota Land Cruiser derived products. The other thing, finally, you get on the Overtrail here at the rear, aside from just unique bumpers, aprons, you also get factory pre-wiring for your towing kit. So beneath this removable cover, everything's already there wired up. You're just going to need to get your dealer to fit your tow ball. Well, if there was one area when it comes to the new GX that could be slightly disappointing, depending on where you're coming from, what kind of car you currently drive, it might be the on-road driving. And that's because the GX is definitely truckier than most other SUVs on the road. Now that should be fairly obvious. This does have a Toyota Land Cruiser chassis, so we should expect it to drive like a fairly bulky, fairly heavy body-on-frame four-wheel drive. And it does. Lexus hasn't really been able to pull a rabbit out of the hat on this stuff. So when you're driving the GX, you're kind of rollicking along the road a bit like we are here, and you feel the bumps more than you would in something like a VW Touareg or an Audi Q7 or BMW X5, because this vehicle is a dedicated off-roader. It is a body-on-frame vehicle. It doesn't have the comfort or the refinement of monocoque unibody SUVs, which you may well be considering. Now, of course, if this doesn't matter to you and the capability of the GX is what you're looking for, and the honesty and the durability and the quality of a Lexus with Toyota Land Cruiser underpinnings, then this will not be an issue. But I just want to make clear to you that you're not actually buying an SUV with the GX, you're buying a true four-wheel drive, even though it is one lined in high-end Lexus material. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about the engine, because this is the area the GX is head and shoulders above the new Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. The Prado has retained the same old 2.8 litre single turbo diesel 4-cylinder engine, the same one that it currently has, albeit with 48 volt mild hybrid assistance. But that engine is nothing to write home about. It's competent, it's reasonably efficient, but it is slow in the big heavy Prado. Now the new Prado is still keeping that engine, so it's, it probably won't be blowing us away in terms of performance. Step across to the GX though, and you are in a different world. This car has a 3.5 litre, potentially 3.4 litre, depending on how you round the actual capacity of the motor, but it's a petrol twin turbo V6 with 260 kilowatts of power. That is 110 kilowatts more than the Prado, and boy, can you tell. The GX550 absolutely gets up and boogies away from a red light. It is a quick car, and out here on country roads and highways, there's plenty of power to overtake. The engine is really good, and it's shared with the larger and even more opulent Lexus LX, which is the Lexus model based on the full-size 300 series Toyota Land Cruiser. Now, the LX tune is a little bit different, the GX is a little bit more modest, but this is heaps of engine for a Prado-sized vehicle. There is also a 4-cylinder turbo petrol hybrid in the works, and I think that is almost certain to come to Australia in the next year or two, because Lexus Australia has already promised that it will be a fully electrified lineup of cars in 2030. So that means the GX will have to be hybrid by 2030, and it's already 2024. I would expect to see it in 2025 or maybe 2026. But until the hybrid arrives in the next couple of years, most likely, the V6 petrol is a really adequate, even good engine with one big drawback: fuel economy. Here in the US, it hasn't yet been rated, but they're talking about 20 miles per gallon, which is around 12 litres per 100 Ks. And today I've easily gotten 19 or 20 miles per gallon. So in mixed driving, you should expect 11, 12, 13 litres per 100, which is really not that bad. But if most of your driving is in town, or you like to really get into the power that's on offer here, you'll be better expecting like 15, 16. So not exactly diesel-like in terms of economy. And the combined issue is range. The fuel tank size is not as big as it should be, so the effective range of this car isn't that great. I'll put my calculations on screen here. So that's the powertrain. Let's talk about the ride and handling. Off-roading is one thing, and I've got some footage in this video of me driving an Overtrail on some really difficult obstacles, and it was really impressive. But most people's driving the GX is going to be on-road. And here in Arizona, a lot of the roads are pretty straight and pretty flat, but there are a few mountain passes, like the one that I'm on here, and this gives us an opportunity to test some roads that are pretty similar to what we see in Australia in terms of the bumps and in terms of the corners. And the GX is competent, but not much more. The ride quality is easily best on the base model, which has 20-inch alloy wheels and street tires. The Overtrail does get smaller 18s, but its all-terrain tires never settle on a flat bit of bitumen. Instead, it's always pitter-pattering around, and that gets pretty boring pretty quickly. Whereas the luxury grade on 20s is nice and settled. The sports luxury has 22s. I haven't driven that as yet. I would expect the compliance to be not quite as good. Now, the base car is particularly impressive given that it rides on passive dampers. This one does not have the adaptive variable suspension, and I think it does absolutely fine without it. So I'd probably be happy just to buy this car in base specification, because it's still much nicer than any Prado. The interior in particular does really feel Lexus grade in terms of quality and most of the materials. When it comes to handling, The GX is better than you might expect in the corners, but again, it's no match for something like an Audi Q7 or a BMW X5, which have a huge advantage in terms of lightness and also in terms of their unibody construction. With the GX, just like a 300 series Land Cruiser, you have to be quite patient when you're cornering and not really jerk at the steering wheel too hard or too quickly. Once you get the GX loaded up in a corner though, you actually can lean on this very decent chassis, the TNGA F body-on-frame chassis. You can lean on it pretty hard, and the GX actually can take corners relatively quickly. But you need to get used to driving a body-on-frame vehicle, which requires a bit more patience, a bit more caution than what you need to exercise in those car-based SUVs that you might be considering instead of this Lexus. A massive upside is refinement though. The cabin is so quiet. There is a distant rumble of the engine and an occasional rumble through the cabin from various bumps and things on the road, but by and large it's serene, it's quiet, and if you're expecting a rattle or a squeak, well, firstly it's a Lexus, and secondly there are none. Even in these cars that have been driven up and down gravel all day for 2 weeks on this launch by a bunch of journos that don't have much mechanical sympathy, to be completely honest. The quality seems sky high, and for me that is a huge draw card of buying this over one of its rivals. In terms of the safety tech, it's decent. So if you turn on adaptive cruise control and the lane centering, it actually works relatively well, and it's not pogoing from line to line. It holds the center of the lane fairly well. The mirrors, not the best. They look really cool, but the visibility out of them is a little constricted compared to a broader mirror. That being said, they do remind me so much of the FJ Cruiser, a vehicle I love, so I'd probably still take these awesome looking mirrors. Visibility all round though is awesome. You sit high, the belt line is low, the view out is really good. This is a car which I think a lot of people will find very lovable. Sure, it's not the best car to drive in its segment. It is an off-roader first and foremost, but one that's fairly pleasant on the bitumen as well. But there's a durability here, there's an honesty here above and beyond so many of this vehicle's competitors, and I think many people in Australia are gonna like this mix of ingredients. I know I do. All right, we're gonna take the Overtrail off-road now. Very important part about this car, because while I'm sure almost all GX owners back in Australia are gonna be spending 99% of their time on-road, a bit like any product from Land Rover, the off-road capability of this Lexus is a huge part of what's gonna sell this car. This is, Land Cruiser derived product, so high expectations. The guys here on the first drive of the GX have built a pretty amazing little off-road course, which is no joke. And I'll try my best to capture on camera the obstacles that we're traversing and show you from outside what's going on, because from inside, you can't really tell how serious it is. Right now, driving over a set of parallel logs and using the multi-terrain camera in order to see exactly where the front tires are placed. They're highlighted by some yellow lines on the screen. So currently driving completely over the log. I can't actually see it, but I've got two things helping me out. I've got the camera showing me where my tires are, but there's also the fact that the bonnet of the GX has two very prominent squared off flares, left and right, and they line up with the tires. So I've got a good passive idea of what's going on at the front of the car. Now, coming up to some Moguls, which start off relatively moderate, but then they become very, very serious very quickly. So we've got the center diff and the rear diff locked, and just letting the car drive itself through this system of Moguls. Steering wheel's making its own decisions, but the car's tracking straight, just pulling itself through. And the level of articulation is really quite something. So the Overtrail has E-KDSS standard, and we are getting some incredibly significant articulation. It's actually ridiculous how easy traversing this system of Moguls is. There's 83 millimeters more articulation in the new GX with E-KDSS than the old GX here in the US with KDSS. So this is not a technology which is staying still. Little old KDSS from Dunsborough, Western Australia. Toyota purchased it, and they have turned it into really quite a beast in terms of its ability as a passive system, its ability to offer you that level of articulation, and the effective full disconnection of the front sway bar. I mean, this thing can do some amazing stuff. And that's all part of the promise, right? The GX is not trying to be a soft roader. It's not trying to be a car-based SUV. This is what the Americans would call a truck, but it's a proper four-wheel drive based on a Toyota Land Cruiser 250 series. And this course is all about proving that. So that was just driving around a sort of flattened wall. Felt pretty cool. The next obstacle you're gonna see is really something special. So what we've got next is basically a really big hole in the ground. The ascent and the descent are so significant that our visibility is seriously impaired. So we have the forward camera, but we also have crawl control, which I've got active right now in its middle speed. It's got 5 selectable speeds. The drive mode dial turns into a effectively off-road cruise control speed select, and the car basically does the work. What we have coming up is our exit out of this hole, which is a 32-degree climb. When you're looking at it from afar, it doesn't look like that much. Driving up to it now, it starts to look a little bit crazy, and then things get really weird on our way up and out of this thing. Might be one of those things you have to drive to really get the sensation. I suspect it is, but we are about to go what feels vertical. I'm seeing sky, all I see is power lines and sky, and the front view camera takes care of the rest, and crawl control just pulls us out. So hey, it's a Land Cruiser. Lexusified. That's the point. So that's our comprehensive first drive of the 2024 Lexus GX. Very much looking forward to getting these back on our testing roads in Australia, where final decisions always get made. But first impressions, even second and third impressions of this vehicle are really positive. I think you can tell that it is derived from a Toyota Land Cruiser chassis. It is not the last word in refinement and comfort on smooth road surfaces. But what you are getting is a vehicle with immense off-roading capability. You are getting a high degree of luxury, particularly in the cabin, and you are getting a much nicer engine that you can get in the Land Cruiser Prado back in Australia. For those reasons, I don't think Lexus is going to struggle to sell the 1,250 GXs, which will come to Australia in 2024. I think the demand is going to be a bit higher than that. So this is going to be another car where I can easily see a wait list forming. So if you're interested in it, I'd be talking to a dealer sooner rather than later, so you're not down the queue. As for me, I'd be considering either the base model luxury on 20-inch wheels or this Overtrail on 18-inch wheels. Just a shame you can't get all the fruit on the Overtrail, which is probably the way I would want my GX. That's my opinion. Very keen to know yours. Please let me know down below this video in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.